right, everybody, welcome to J3U podcast, and I'm your host, and with me is Luke Miller, my co-host, and we have a fun episode with the Hunter Labrada, coming from his Olympia debut, going now into the Chicago Pro. We're both 11 days out for the Chicago.
I was about to say, man, stoked that you're doing it with me. It's going to be fun. Texas is going to be very well represented, I feel like, between the Open and the 212, so it'll be good.
Oh, yeah, I agree. It's so confusing telling people, like, it's the Chicago Pro. It's like, oh, you're going to love Chicago. It's like, no, it's in Atlanta. And they're like, what?
And it's really shitty because I really do love Chicago. Like, I've only been there one time, and it was when Brian competed in whichever shows there, Junior USA's, Junior Nationals is there. So that's the only time I've ever been there, and it's, like, sick there. So, yeah, bummed it's not there.
I did Chicago in 2019, and of course it's the Chicago Pro. It's a great show, but I can't lie. Like, part of the reason I picked it was because Chicago, and I've never had Chicago pizza. Did you get a Chicago pizza when you're out there?
I did two things. We did Chicago pizza, and then we went to this cheeseburger place, and it was called Au Cheval, and it's like this like countrywide famous cheeseburger place. Like, we put our name in and got to eat 2 hours later kind of deal. But damn it was worth it. It was like the first time in my life I could say it was worth it. So it was like a sick day. Like, Brian finished up with the show. We went and ate cheeseburgers at this place. There was like a big like outdoor music festival, farmers market thing going on. Walked around, got all sunburned. So it was a good memory in Chicago. But yeah, no, we're going to make good memories in Chicago, Atlanta, the Chilanta Pro, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. No, there's one called Eight Sushi Lounge. We've already researched it. So that's supposed to be.
I was going to say, I need to get with you and Renee because y'all seem pretty serious about your post-show food. I need to
just go watch eating YouTube videos. They got like the breakfast lineup in one of them that's like the whole table fucking covered. And
yeah, I don't
know.
They
do it big like both ways though, because y'all will go like to restaurants and get like the tastiest looking stuff ever. But I've seen y'all cook some stuff that looks fantastic too.
We like our food. We don't get a lot of it but when we do, it better be damn good quality. Like, that's
you make it count.
Yeah. Well, man,
John, you the kind of guy that if your bowl of cream of rice or oatmeal isn't like perfect, it's going in the sink and you're making it again?
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm just making sure we're on the same page. The closer I get to the show, the more bowls that go in the sink too.
Yeah, Renee, like she comes from like a family that, like, you know, they weren't like extremely well off, so like throwing food away was not really an option. So every time it happens to her, she looks at it like, maybe I'll just eat it, babe. Like, no, give it to me, throw it away. Like, we can sacrifice some carbs easily for the cheap ingredients, but
yeah. Mush is life towards the end. Mush is life.
Well, anyway, man, like coming off Olympia, coming off any stage, like we all do, like the off season, it's probably already in the mind before you even hit the stage. So coming off Olympia, you knew you had areas that you wanted to improve on. Looking over your stage picks, like what does that kind of like analysis look like for you coming from Olympia in the off season? And did you already have a timeline set for like, hey, this many weeks I'll do this show and I'll off season for this long, or kind of Take me through your thought process coming off Olympia for improving.
So, thought process coming off of Olympia, I always look at myself through two different lenses, you know, when I finish up a show. And that's one, you know, was enough tissue there? If there wasn't enough tissue, where does the tissue need to go? The other lens is, you know, what was the conditioning? Like, was your water balance right? You know, did you look the way you wanted to? Where could you have been more fat-free if there was any fat left on your body, that kind of thing. So, you know, with the Olympia, you know, after the year that I had, I was relatively happy with the conditioning. I feel like it could have been a little better, but, you know, whenever I consider the fact that, you know, I spent that entire off season kind of coming back from a shoulder surgery, and then I spent, you know, I started prep literally February 1st for what was going to be the New York Pro on May 18th. But we all know how that year went, thanks COVID. So, you know, started prep February 1st, ended up competing in Tampa in the beginning of August. And then, stayed loaded up and, went all the way through to the Olympia in December. It was a long ass year on my body. So conditioning wise at the Olympia, I was relatively happy with how we looked. Could have been better, yes, but with the year that my body had, it is what it is. The more important, lens for me that I said I looked through was, where does the tissue need to go? Where do we need more size? Because, obviously I'm one of the younger guys in men's open. I'm one of the newer guys in men's open, and I still have some growing to do. From the waist down, I feel like I can hold my own. I feel like I can always be better, but I feel like I can hold my own from the waist down. From the waist up, it was very apparent, looking at the pictures, the difference between, the top 6 and then, outside of the top 6 is that upper body size for me, like looking at the pictures, comparing myself to them, it's like, okay, legs are pretty much there, but, you need, another 7 to 9 pounds up top was the number I had in my head, so 7 to 9 pounds, not going to happen in 1 year. 7 to 9 pounds mainly in my back and chest too. I'll say that too. I was decently happy with how my shoulders and arms looked. Once again, it's bodybuilding. You can never have too big arms though, right? So, finished up with the Olympia, knew that I had a long year, so gave myself a full month to just kind of, train and eat and, just chill. And we always set a plan. I'm never one of those guys to kind of fly by the seat of their pants. So, we finished up, and when we thought about 2021, first and foremost, when we were planning, we were planning on another December Olympia, so that was, the first, of this year was, whenever they announced the Olympia is going to be in October, not in December. Cause it's like, okay, I just lost 2 months of, my little plan. And, unfortunately those 2 months are the, relax, give your body time to get healthy, chill, those are the 2 months that I lost. Cause we're going to finish up with Chicago. We're going to be about 10 out, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, there's no time, you go home, we're going to eat for, a week maybe. And then it's time to rein it back in, I'm going to try and push my body weight up. I'm talking about all this like I'm going to handle business in Chicago like I'm planning on. I'm not talking about that like it's a sure thing either, but that's a whole different subject. But so set the plan. Plan was Olympia was going to be in December, so we were going to pick a show, mid-year, so we had time to A, grow in the off season, B, have a prep for that show in the mid-year, and then C, have some time to A, let the body rest, and then B, really rebound and try and add some more size before we started pulling back down for the Olympia. Hindsight's always 2020, but the Olympia is in October, obviously, and we're competing, and we're going to be 10 weeks out when we finish up Chicago. So that threw not a wrench in the plan, but it's obviously not optimal, especially, I feel like with my body type, because I don't have a problem getting lean, but my body does get tired, after a while. So it is what it is.
Was it always Chicago? Was that always the pick before you knew the
Chicago was always the pick. New York, if it was the date it was supposed to be May, it's like we finished up in December. And if you take a full 4 months, you're starting prep February 1st. There was going to be no time for improvement with that. So I know I wanted to do a show, like July or, early August. I had done Tampa already. I won Tampa. And I didn't want to, eggs all in one basket because, the cutoff for the Olympia is it Tampa or Texas? It's Texas, right?
Well, now it's Texas. Of course, back then we didn't even know the cutoff. So
or the Texas Pro existed or had open.
Yeah,
I don't know
if So just for me too, I was like, well, if the Olympia is in December, I don't know. The cutoff is still Tampa.
Yeah, if I would have known about the Texas Pro after I walked off stage of the Olympia last year, it being the first year and it being back in Texas and it, being the time frame that it was, I probably honestly would have ended up, doing that show. But, with what was on the table, it was Chicago. That's the timing that worked out best. I feel like it's a big, show outside of the Arnold's and the Olympias. It's not like a step back or sideways from Tampa. So that's always been my thing is don't take steps backwards.
And it's still not even our ideal time frame, right? Because probably if it was in December, hitting a show late September as a qualifier or early November probably would have been ideal, but we didn't know then. because Chicago, like when we had Olympia, we're like, all right, we're probably going December. You'd have maybe like a 7-month period. You have 2 months of kind of downish time. It's still a shorter off season though, and then from that Chicago to maybe December, that's a tough kind of, it's a real funky schedule, right? It doesn't really give you a great off season ever. But what I saw is like you made significant improvement regardless, like within this time period.
I feel like those terms, like off season and in contest prep and stuff are like way too synonymous with, like getting super fat or I'm getting super shredded,
it's not growing,
Yeah. It's like people see how lean I stay in the off season. It's not because I kill myself. It's because I have a fast metabolism. But, like when I start prep and, we start putting things back in my protocol, but I'm still eating, 6, 7, 8, 900 grams of carbs a day, I'm going to grow. And, at this point, like with this prep, like I had good energy in the gym and was truly pushing my logbook until 4 weeks out. So if I'm doing that, then something's happening. So people get so stuck up on, well, I'm not growing one bit because I'm in a deficit, or I'm in prep, and they're not even really in a deficit because they're early on in prep, and they pull back on stuff and they don't train as hard, and I feel like that's why I was able to make that kind of progress was we were training like it was the off season because my calories were off-season high, to be blunt, at the start of prep, and we just kept on rolling with it until, probably about a week ago now, where it's just, shit started tanking, but it is what it is.
I think that's an excellent point to pull out, because our phases they're really pretty much all conjoined within one. Like things change, like variables change for us as we move closer to shows or further away from shows. But to just say like I went into lower calorie and all of a sudden that flips off the switch for building tissue, that's really not the case. At some point, high level, maybe, yeah. But we see it all the time. Like you can still grow even in a deficit. Like you can still accrue tissue. And of course, like we have like the, performance enhancing substances that will definitely alter the balance. And that plays a big factor into it. But yeah,
of course, that and obviously your metabolism / genetics, but at the end of the day, it comes down to smart nutritional programming, because you can be in a decent sized deficit where you're getting lean, but have your carbs and your fats arranged in a way around training time where you can keep training performance so high that, because you're trying to cause a response in the gym. You're not, so if you're able to cause that response and push training performance, and you're still eating as much protein as you are, because you're never not eating enough protein, the factors for growth are present, especially in a contest prep phase, like where the androgens are really high. So
you brought up something about fatigue management and your prep feeling like the perception's easier. I want to get into that because I think that's really important to also keep improving. But going back earlier, like the initial like training setup, knowing you needed like back and chest, like what did that mean? Because is it a full swap of your training program? Or was it more looking at like, hey, what exercise, why am I not getting these areas to grow? Am I exercise execution off? Like what was the main thing that you found in your programming or just in your execution that had to improve for those body parts to keep coming up?
So if you had asked me like at the beginning of 2020 or even like, like halfway through 2019, I definitely would have said it was definitely a mechanics like form execution thing that needed to be corrected. But, I feel like I did a very good job of, becoming a student of the lower lat contraction gain, because that's basically what I was after, was more lower lats. And, got to the point where, I'm never going to say you do anything perfect, but I feel like I'm able to get a very, optimal positioning and contraction and you get everything we look for in the exercise. So, once I got to that point, which, I feel like I got to that point for sure by the start of 2020, I definitely think it fell more on a frequency and a volume thing than it did, like a exercise selection or a form thing. Because, frankly, I train extremely low volume, like 6 to 8 sets for, across the board. So I was training on a modified push-pull leg split. So push-pull, arms, legs, off, repeat with the focus for the leg day, alternating between a ham focus and a quad focus. So, I was doing, it was a 5-day training cycle. So every 10 days I was doing, maybe, 12 to 16 sets from my back. It's not a lot of volume. And, if I was, completely even or something and everything was growing at the same rate, that might be okay. But, obviously I had body parts that we wanted to bring up, and, it just worked really well to shift things around, and really, like, we legitimately doubled my back volume by going to, a full 7-day split. And we detailed all this in a YouTube video. I'm sorry, I'm kind of rambling about it. It's a lot to think about and talk.
Yeah, no, for sure.
About.
For sure.
But, so we went to a 7-day split that has, a true hamstring day and a true quad day. But on the hamstring day, I'm deadlifting and doing, 4 working sets of lats. And then on the other back day, it's a complete, this complete back day. And, it's a little bit higher in volume than I was doing. It's typically like 8 to 10 sets now instead of 6 to 8. So, in the I basically just kind of not doubled my volume, but significantly increased it. That, and then for the push day, we have a true push day where I literally do, 4 presses and dips. And then we have, a push day, and it's basically all of the isolation movements. So, 2 variations of a fly, 2 variations of a lateral, and then triceps with it. So I was able to increase the volume on my chest too, without really increasing the wear and tear on my joints tremendously, which was a big one, because I do get, elbows, inflamed and hurt, if I start pressing too much, like most people do.
Yeah, there's always this big debate. It's it'll never end, I feel like. We're volume versus intensity, and training to failure, or you don't train to failure. It's black or white. You're low volume or you're high volume. You're not both. And I think that is insightful, because you kind of trend between these 2 extremes. And, you have volume allocated to body parts that just need more, and then deprioritize even lower volume to areas that you don't need as much.
Or that don't require as much stimulus. That was another reason we went to the new split, for example, because that arm day, it had essentially become a 25, 30-minute workout that was literally 5 working sets. It was, especially on prep, it was a waste of a day from an energy expenditure standpoint, which was another big reason that we, did the split switch when we did. Was, every single day now is definitely a hard day from an energy expenditure standpoint. There's no, easy days, if you will.
And I mean, I know you brought arms up, but I mean, once you've brought arms up, kind of taking that arm day out, it kind of moves it to closer to, you can still improve them, but it's closer to a maintenance level now. And it's justifiable to be able to have those extra days allocated to back or more chest work. Did you find, because that's a different setup with having more compound push day than having a second push day that's kind of more isolation. Do you find that isolation push day just to be overall less systemically taxing? Because that's the day before you do your back and hams deadlift day, right?
That's the day before the hard back day, the long back day.
Yeah.
So honestly, it's funny that you said that, because that's kind of what I was about to say. Was, I keep on going back to, especially when I'm prep. Well, I made the switch when I'm prep for all of these reasons. Mentally, knowing I'm going to the gym and not having to press and get under any extreme weight. A is good for my actual CNS fatigue, and but mentally it's an easier day mentally per se, and that makes a big difference, for me to walk in there and attack, the isolation work. And, it works well for me. Essentially at the end of the day, I'm a big believer, especially on prep, that, you got to Jedi mind trick yourself with things.
And from an injury perspective for point two, like you said, your elbows kind of give you trash. Like having that one day where you press and then kind of leave it alone probably helps with the management of that as you build up fatigue across the prep as well, right?
Exactly. And, so obviously they're getting used a lot. I get where they're getting beat up when I try biceps and triceps. So, my elbows really are only getting, really like heavy stimulus 2 days a week now instead of, like every single day but legs. So it's made a big difference for that, that, and then just being really on top of my prehab work for them for a while now.
I saw your 2 push day setups, and a problem with me trying to bring up chest is I did 2 full push days, and it would just eventually after a few weeks just beat me up connective tissue wise, right? And like I just can't press that much every day. And doing something like even I don't know if do you change the rep range at all on that day, or is it still like I don't know if you
I'll typically at this point I haven't really messed around with my rep range much. I'm typically always, aiming for like a 9 to 11 typically. Okay. Yeah.
It's even isolation movements, it's still right around there.
Yeah, and on some of the isolation movements, the back offset, I might, I do like a 25% reduction instead of like a 15, and I go for like a 12 to 15 or something like that. But the first working set for across the board is typically like a 9 to 11.
Yeah, and I think Luke, you're saying like fatigue management is huge just with an isolation day like that, right?
Yeah, and that's one of the big things across a prep too, is like fatigue is probably the number one driver of lack of progress across a prep, and especially when we're trying to basically be in a state of fatigue across the entire prep. And if it sets up that back day where you need the volume as well, that to me is probably the best sequential thought process there when it comes to like placing that day into a day that's going to be a little bit more fatiguing overall. One of the questions I did have though, as we
it's funny that you said that, Luke, because that was the feedback that came out the other end of me actually shooting the split to John, because initially I had the pressing day the day before that big back day, and then the isolation day just off by itself before the quad day, and he was like, why don't you switch this and this, because it's going to set you up better for that stretch, especially since back's a priority. And I was like, that's why I sent it to you, buddy. Thank you.
I forgot that was part of my feedback. I was like, all right.
That was like honestly like the best feedback that came out of it was that, and you just set yourself up for it. You forgot about it, the prep brain, right?
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to ask is the pulling in of the deadlift so close to the show on the floor, because just from like a fatigue management standpoint, especially as that waist size is coming down, we're losing that circumference for brace capacity. It's going to probably drive a little bit more fatigue than other exercise selection. Like where did the thought process behind that come from, especially when we're looking at patterns that bring up back specifically, and devoting as much volume as we can to that?
Yeah, so obviously deadlifting from the floor, not that great of an exercise specifically just for, back development, but it wasn't just I want a thicker back. Like I really wanted, from floor to, trap, I wanted thicker everywhere. And, the rack pulls that we were doing, I would argue were more taxing than pulling from the floor the way that we set them up, because, I was pulling, a full, 2 inches below the patella with, we used a game scale one time. At the lockout, it was 220 pounds worth of band tension, and we were pulling, 545 on the bar. So, significantly more weight, and I feel like I handled it well, and my body was used to it. And it was one of those movements that, intrinsically maybe that I was just attached to. At the end of the day, there is some of that in my split too. I will say that, I'm just intrinsically attached to these exercises, somewhat. I've gotten away from, being intrinsically attached to things that like have no business being in a split. But, for me to be like, okay, well, I'm going to deadlift on my hamstring day. And, I've never been a deadlifter from the floor kind of guy. So for me, that being such a novel stimulus, it's made a big difference. And, I know, proprioception is not everything, but, the feeling that I get in my hamstrings and the level of fatigue and just smokiness I have from doing the deadlifts into my hamstring work has been a really cool thing for me. So, and, at the end of the day, it's what you can recover from, right? And, I did it for the Tampa prep. I did it for the Olympia prep. And then I've done it this entire prep too. And it's never been, oh my God, my SI joints are killing me, or, my lower back's always blowing up, or, I don't even want to get up to go pee right now. I'm so tired. So it's just, it's worked well for me. It would be the best way to answer it.
Was RDL ever on the table for that?
I've never really connected well with RDLs from the standpoint of using them for both a hamstring and a lower back movement, because the second I get the load to a load that I can't do 15 or 20 reps with, I feel like it predominantly just my lower back takes over. So it's definitely an exercise that I've spent a lot of time messing around with. I've been able to get the best feeling for myself personally by using a little bit of toe elevation and either using dumbbells or getting in a Smith machine, so I can really just focus on the hip hinge. At the end of the day, it's just, you get good at whatever you do a lot of, and I haven't done a lot of hip hinging in my training career, if I'm being honest with you. It's been I started rack pulling consistently probably about 1.5 years ago, and I started pulling from the ground consistently for the first time 3 months ago, 4 months ago. Before that, it had never been a consistent thing. So
that's interesting, because usually that's a beginning movement for people, and then people kind of phase out of doing it, which you're flipped now. You're phasing into doing hip hinges and pulls, which I almost there's a lot of similarities with us, Hunter, because I need chest and back, and our splits are pretty similar, but I'm also very emotionally attached to deadlifting. I just truly enjoy doing it.
Well, see, and you're an incredible deadlifter. You have your powerlifting background, obviously, but you look at your physique from behind, and you can tell you deadlifted as much as you have. That's the look that I want, and that's the look that I'm going for, and that's the reason the exercise got put in. Yeah. You're a great example of why the exercise got put in. You look at your back shots, and that guy fucking deadlifts.
Yeah, you have that, because I go back and forth with Luke all the time, because I want that erector thickness, that it's just, you can tell, someone that's done their work with heavy loading of the spine, deadlifting or whatever it may be, it's there. And to not have that, your back just doesn't look complete. So I'm how do we bias that as bodybuilders without creating so much systemic fatigue that it's not productive for our other movements? I will have to say, I think this whole fatigue discussion has gotten a little overblown, and it's taken people just away from just training hard or training too little as well.
And well, what I think it comes down to is, I think the people that, have been able, and, for the large part, I consider it to be a good thing, been able to position themselves as educators or leaders in our field, both as athletes and coach/educators, like you and Luke are, you're an athlete as well, and Luke's an athlete as well. You get what I'm saying. But crap brain, man.
Fatigue management. We're going over how's overblown.
Fatigue. Okay, yeah, fatigue management. It's become one of those things where it's people like you and me and Luke and John and a bunch of the up and coming guys in the IFBB. We all have the work capacity and the head on our shoulders too. If we don't check it, we drive ourselves into the ground. At the end of the day, though, it takes a really long time to build that mentality and that work capacity to the point where you're truly going to exceed your body's ability to recover, especially whenever you have everything in check, So I feel it's one of those things that, 210-pound Joe Blow from the gym has watched a lot of videos of, tippity top of the line bodybuilder XYZ who really does just put his nose to the grindstone every single day for the last decade. And, at times he's got to feather the throttle. I feel a lot of people are oh, well, I'm a little tired and achy today. I might be training too hard. I need to pull back. My fatigue management's off, and that's not what it is,
And I also think it's not we don't have to always find the best stimulus to fatigue ratios, and it's a great concept. I think it has a ton of application for people to understand fatigue. But at the same time, if we wanted like the best stimulus in fatigue, we'd probably just be doing only isolation exercises, and our workouts would be like fucking 20 exercises long. So you also have to program from like an efficiency standpoint as well too, and an enjoyment standpoint. Like I came into this as someone that loved to train, not really like I wanted to get big, of course, but I mean, it's truly was down. Like I just loved getting in the gym, getting stronger and training. So I need movements that I enjoy doing. So if there is the optimal and there's one that's maybe it's a little less optimal, but I'm really excited about doing it. If I'm excited and put the enjoyment and effort into that, I'll probably see better progression than doing something I'm not that excited about doing. So I think that trade-off's fair enough and perfectly acceptable to do.
On that note, though, Hunter, you had made a statement about
phrase that I was just going to say a phrase that I'm really fond of that's really kind of applicable to what we're talking about is don't get paralysis by analysis. You know, we can, talk about it, but at the end of the day, you write your split, you run your split, you're going to know in 3 or 4 weeks if it's too much or not. And then you can regulate your volume from there. People get so concerned and, need to talk to this guy and then this person. And then, well, what do you think about this volume? And, well, this exercise here instead of there. And then, well, this day I want to manage my spinal loading. I was like, dude, just run it for a month and see how your body feels, So paralysis by analysis is a real thing.
It's interesting.
Go ahead.
Well, John and I are debating my sessions quite a bit right now, right? And like, how much do I need to RDL with the amount of glute development I have? And like, for me, it's an enjoyment factor thing, but I'm very aware of like, it's driving hamstring loading, but it's probably driving a little more glute loading with the way I execute it, and like finding that balance of enjoyment to what needs to be in the program. But one of the comments you made, Hunter, is that the majority of your sessions have thrown out a lot of those things that you are emotionally attached to. And so there is that point where you have to decide, okay, am I doing everything I can to be the best bodybuilder I am? And how emotionally attached across the entire program is someone? And I think like some of the prime examples, and you can walk us through more, is like including things like that Nautilus pull down, like that Nautilus lat pull down that you have at your facility. Like that's like a piece I'm thinking about buying just for having up here. It's like those kind of movement patterns that people may be missing if they're trying to analyze your stuff a little bit too in depth, where it's like, yeah, okay, he might be doing deadlifting that might not be the best pattern, but look at the rest of his fucking program that's hyper specific to the things that he needs to be doing. So just kind of like walk us through like maybe some of the things that you've had to detach yourself from, and like some of the things you feel like you're getting a lot out of within your program, so they can see like the positive decisions too, where you've had to detach from that.
Yeah. So some of the things that I've gotten away from, I'm going to speak solely just about back development, just because that's basically the only thing that I really feel like I have been attached to that I don't need to be attached to, because everything else I've latched on to things that were okay to latch on to, I guess, but, for back, for the longest time, it was, okay, you want a big back, do weighted pull-ups and, do bent over rows every single workout. And I was like, okay, cool, bet. And then, so for 3 years during college, pretty much every single back session I would do, weighted pull-ups and bent over rows and, some kind of like pull down and cable row. And that'd be the back day for the day, maybe deadlift or something, like once in a blue moon. But, at the end of the day, and as my understanding grew, I was using my upper back to do basically everything, and my physique reflected it. I wasn't using my lower lat to do anything. I was, doing bent over barbell rows mainly with my traps with a, elbow pattern that, is impossible to engage the lat because it's going out. It's not going back, and the biggest difference for me, and I'll shout him out for this, it was, getting to work with Joe Bennett for a while. He really, kind of opened my eyes up to, and I'll use this phrase is, the biggest difference came from when I started training my physique from an anatomical standpoint. what is going to put myself in the most braced position to get the insertion to the origin as close as possible while having the best resistance profile. And, you know, that's a mouthful for most people, but I know I can say that to y'all and be like, yeah, that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to cause as strong a contraction as possible and as biomechanically as correct a position with as heavy a load as possible. And, you know, whenever he told me that and, you know, took me through the workouts and, you know, really, you know, opened my eyes up to, you know, like just getting in the positioning to even having a lower lat contraction in the first place, you know, it really, you know, like I went home and it just turned everything on its head. You know, everything was, you know, okay, you're training quads. Well, how can I get as much knee flexion out of this exercise as possible? Because that's what my quad's responsible for, is my knee flexion. And it just completely changed the way I thought about training. That was like the biggest thing. And that honestly helped me, you know, get rid of any of those emotional attachments that I had to pretty much anything. Because, you know, it's like, well, why the fuck am I doing a pull-up like this if I need lower lats? And the only way to have my lower lat engaged is have that elbow tucked and driven and close to the body. You know, it's like weighted pull-ups are pointless for what I'm trying to do. You know, like bent over rows, you know, like I can't keep my elbow tucked. I don't have the wrist mobility to do that. It's not engaging my lower lat as much as something else. So, you know, the second that the light bulb went off to really look at things from a biomechanic and, you know, anatomical standpoint, that's when, you know, I lost pretty much all the attachment to anything I shouldn't be doing, like that.
Yeah, the attachment was like, hey, I want to grow. You know,
not. Well, at the end of the day, I have fun training. You know, the way that I do, and you know, I have fun. You know, it being a contest with myself. I was never like, oh my God, I got a bench press, or oh my God, I got a deadlift, or oh my God, I got a squat. You know, like I'd go through my phases of exercises for sure. But at the end of the day, the thing that brought me the most enjoyment in the gym was just, you know, like I didn't use a logbook until recently, but, you know, like pushing the logbook, because, you know, it's like you got a photographic memory with weights we lift, right? If you're a serious meathead. So I was always just trying to be a little bit better than the last time. And then, yeah, I just loved watching myself change in the mirror. So, you know, the attachments to exercises necessarily weren't there so much as the attachment to growth. And once, you know, the light bulb went off, well, this is the fastest way to grow, I became very attached to that very quickly.
You know, I think a lot of it comes down to like you get attached to more of like a belief system, and you want to believe in the system, and that you're in the process of truly improving. Because I came from like powerlifting, but also my first introduction was like DC training, and the system was so well, and it's still great. It's nothing against it. I'm just an example here that I believed in it. And the fact, like, I believed in this thing of going in the gym and executing, you know, the DC training was going to get me the outcome. And I think changing like what Joe Bennett did for you, he kind of changed your belief system and to where you 100% believe that doing these things would lead to the improvements and outcomes that you wanted to see. And that's exciting in the enjoyment of it. I think changing the thought process of not that you're doing something that and you don't believe in it or you doubt it, that you like can truly 100% buy into it. I think anything like with coaching athletes, like once they buy into your process, they're full on board and will be really adherent. But the ones that don't are usually the ones that are kind of like sidelining and aren't fully bought in yet. But I think developing the education along the way is huge for us as bodybuilders.
I will say this, though, it worked really well that I discovered, you know, like Joe and that method of training, you know, after I had put, you know, like 6 to 8 years of, you know, just nose to the grindstone doing the hard shit in.
Yeah.
Because I don't believe it's the best way to train, you know, initially from the get-go, because I do feel like it takes a long time to make the kind of connection that you need to do to truly train that way. And you are better served, you know, like hitting more compounds and stuff early on. And, you know, everyone's different. And obviously, you know, like if someone was working with like you or me or Luke every single day, that's a really different story than them, you know, like buying access to an app or watching, you know, like YouTube videos of how to do it. You know, you can get them up to snuff really quick if you're working with them in person. But, you know, like your average just going to the gym person, I feel like they are well served to, you know, like go on that little journey of figuring out how to just work hard. Because, you know,
I agree, man. I think there's a lot of top bodybuilders that don't have the education that we've been presented with, that don't have the thought process of moving origin to assertions, and they just train hard. They lift, maybe they even lift shitty, we could say, with crap form, but they still are the most muscled people around. So I think if you had to like distinctly pick, like, hey, like Joe says, like pinky dumbbell execution and finesse, and you never train hard versus kind of shit form and you train really, really hard, the training really hard person is probably going to get a lot farther. Now, that's not to say that you can do you need to do both at the same time, and that there's sometimes too much finesse that takes away from effort, and there's also so much effort that you take away from the finesse side, and then it's always that middle ground, which is what truth lays.
There's different times for balance of it too. I feel like they're, like throttles on a plane almost. It's off season, whenever you're not close to a show and the calories are super high, don't get loose with your form, but if you get an extra rep or two because you got slightly out of position, cool. If you're 2 weeks out and you get slightly out of position and you tweak your lower back or pull a hamstring or something, you're a dumbass, so it's like different thought processes for different times of the year too.
Hunter, you said like currently, like almost just recently, right, that progression in the gym is starting to slow or get stagnant. I don't know if it's declining or not because we're now like 11 days out. Any program changes now that, like, what do you do when you see like in prep this kind of a backslide or stall out? How do you make alterations?
I will definitely own it. As of 5 days ago, the logbook started slipping. Until then, it was maintaining. As of 5 days ago, we started slipping on some exercises and maintaining on some. So, take that for what it is, transparency, right? What did we do when that started happening? My volume's honestly pretty much as low as we want it to be already. So what we did was, we just reduced the load a little and stuck to our rep range. Still, forcing that last rep. I'm not getting like a full forced rep, but, I'm getting the last rep I complete. And then, he's helping me finish, the last one. So +1 on everything still. And, this coming week, we might even take that out depending, like on the look and, how we feel, just, managing. And at this point, and as bad as it is, much as I hate it, because training is the part that I like, it really is about just presenting the best look, I feel like at this point, inside of 2 weeks out. So I don't foresee us having to really pull much more. Like I told y'all in the text messages, but about to, finish up with y'all and then eat and go have what's going to be my last hard leg day before Chicago. So I'll train quads today, hard, and then the hamstring day Thursday, hard. And I'll pull that day probably. Honestly, last time I pulled, I dropped from 6 plates down to 5. This last time I'll probably go to 4 and just really, spend a lot of time under tension, feeling the exercise, feeling my body work. Obviously their deadlifts is good for, energy expenditure. So I want to keep that relatively the same for the day. But, so we're getting close enough to where stuff will start getting kind of pulled back. But, we're 12 days out now. So that's my big thing is, what put the tissue on you will keep the tissue on you. And, as long as you're not like in the last little nitty gritty part where your calories are super low, or you're doing like an hour and a half of cardio a day and you're absolutely hammered, if you're used to training like that, I feel like it's relatively safe to continue to train like that all the way up close to the show.
Yeah, I think those are great takeaways. Because I get people that ask that question, like, what do you do with your training on prep when you see strength dropping? Like, people want to find the tricks around maintaining it. It's like the sad truth is like we're in a state of diminished recovery resources, and eventually that fatigue far outseeds what we can recover from. And we wouldn't be productive anymore if we did kept like lowering volume to where you have a strength-based workout. And so I think that is the best advice. Like, you have kind of a baseline rock bottom volume you get to, and if load in the reps are dropping down, it doesn't make sense to just do like, well, I'm doing 4 reps now. It's like, well, that's from a safety standpoint, that's not right. But also we want to stay in that productive, range that's reasonable, which like if you're staying like 9 to 11, like, and you pick odd numbers, which normally that's not acceptable, but your hunter so will allow. Usually you say like a 13 rep, they're like, what? It has to be 8 to 12.
Well, it's like 10 to 12 makes me feel like I'm doing something wrong if I hit an 8 or a 9, and nothing's wrong with an 8 or a 9, but it's like I never usually make it past 11. So it's like 9 to 11.
Yeah.
It's the thing.
Yeah, so I think maintaining effort is very important within reason.
Yeah, I talked about that the other day. I think effort's one of the biggest things that people just don't pay attention to on prep, as bad as that sounds. Because they're towards the end they just get in that check their boxes mode, and you can't just be like, well, going through the motions. And I know this is a lot of like cliche like sayings, but at the end of the day, they're cliche sayings for a reason. They're true. Effort is king. Effort burns calories. There's a big difference, going through the motions of a 6 to 8 set workout versus taking every single one of those 6 to 8 working sets, to the death, like we do. So, there's a big difference, and effort does play a huge role, especially at the end.
I agree, especially like when you have, because I think volume drives the most fatigue. So we're now reducing your number of sets. So those last reps are really the ones that I think will hold on to the tissue. And if your perception in prep, if fatigue is really high and it's harder, because it's going to feel harder the last reps as you get more fatigued. If those are like, well, I'm going to back off a few, like how many of those stimulating reps are you now removing from the limited sets you're already doing? And that's when you can really start seeing your logbook drop off. And so if you want to maintain it, I think it also is important to maintain that effort level in training, just like you're saying. Another thing you brought up, Hunter, was ordering like when you would pull exercises at all. And it kind of got me thinking about like the actual days prior to the show. Does your split, because you keep the same split, so you have, some guys like to train every day of kind of peak week into the show. Do you still take your normal off days, or does it change at all?
So I'm one of those people that's big on maintaining routine as much as possible. So when we went to that new split, Tuesdays and Fridays are the off days now.
Okay.
Which is really awesome, because guess what? I get to fly in on Tuesday, and the day before the show is Friday, and I'm not supposed to be training that day anyways. But, Wednesday and Thursday are my push and my pull days. So I get to go and train push and pull, and then it's like nothing even changed. So it's that's my thing, is I like, especially the last, couple weeks, and I know you're probably big on this too, but eating the same things at the same times with the same amount of fluids every single day, maintaining every factor as much as possible, especially, the week of, because no matter how much you plan, no matter how much help you have, something always happens. And the more you have under your control, the least stressed you'll be.
Man, I think that makes the best bodybuilders. And that's missing so much in all these people that I coach and see, is that we are like monotonous, just creatures of routine. Everything's the fucking same. That's why we set up our lifestyles to just like, I work at home, so my meals are the same time, I train at the same time, I go to bed at the same time. I hate I hate going out. Well, don't get me wrong, I like to travel and go out. But
there's times of the year for it. I'm prep's not the time of the year for it. It gives me genuine anxiety to be out of my routine, especially as we get close.
Yeah, I enjoy bodybuilding and that more than like doing some of the other activities. So, but I have people that are just all over the place, and they're wondering like, why am I not making progress? Like, dude, you can't even string like a couple days together consistently. The best bodybuilders have done that year after year, and that is checking the block. But it's also like there's a quality within that check mark too, right? Mm-hmm. I think that's missed as well. But I like that on peak week, because I'm the same way. is I pick my flight times to where my day doesn't change. You know, I can still wake up at the same time. And the one thing I did different for New York is I actually trained the day before the show, but I did it just like I would do for the show time. So I get up, had a light pump just like I would for the show, and I did my normal diet. And then for the show, I pretty much did the same thing. So it's like, man, your peak week, it was like the same shit every day. It's like, I know it's not very exciting, but I actually like had a more predictable look on stage, right? So I like that, you know, keeping the routine.
Well, you know, if at the end of the day, if you do it right, and you're not one of those people that's like shooting all the bullets and throwing the gun in the last 3 or 4 days, you should know relatively what you want to look like and how you're going to look. And you know what's going to make you look what you're expecting to look is having the same exact routine as what's been making you look that way.
Yep.
You know, it's just at the end of the day, it really is that simple. People want to overcomplicate it so much. They're like, oh, I look so sick a week out. It's like, then why didn't you keep on doing exactly what you were doing when you were a week out, and then maybe slightly reduce your sodium and pull a little bit of water, maybe. You know, it's like instead they just turn everything upside down and like dump the bodybuilding toolbox out. So
your ebook is not going to be a big seller, Hunter, because you didn't have your approach wasn't complicated.
I know, right?
We were literally talking about this off camera.
Yeah, it's not
about just creating that predictable model in peak week, like you said, with keeping the variables as tangible as possible.
So I won't keep
I talk about this all the time with people, and John can attest to this too. It's like people want to talk about how bodybuilding at the highest level is like, you know, chemical warfare and, you know, just absolutely ridiculous and asinine and this, that, like, show me who they are, because I know most of them, and I know that's not the case. Yeah. I know most of them are just fucking OCD, anal weirdos like I am that do everything right, and they've been doing everything right for 10 or 15 years now. You know, it really is that simple. If people just don't like hearing it takes 10 or 15 years.
Yeah, those are truths, man. I'll let you go because I know that you need to get to training and probably eating, and my mental capacity for these things like declines so fast talking to people. So I try to hang in there.
Well, my thing with them is it's like I start like losing the mental capacity to you know, have meaningful conversation, but I'm on like the phone with like kindred spirits who understand what I'm like dealing with. So it's like just like talking with you.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, no, for sure. It was just fun.
Because I know you have your series on YouTube for your prep. Like for people that want to follow along, like is it mainly your YouTube content that you're pushing out so they can see it?
Yeah. So I'm putting out a video a week at least right now, either through Labrada or Gas. Those are the two companies that I'm doing, you know, the actual like prep series for, if you will. And those are the videos you're going to have like the full training sessions, you know, like the in-depth breakdowns of, you know, like the new split. It'll have, you know, me posing rounds, you know, thought process behind prep, like the actual meat and potatoes information is definitely all on YouTube. You know, that being said, I'll always, you know, make announcement posts on Instagram whenever stuff's going up. And then I'll typically, you know, like do like smaller educational tidbits on Instagram and stuff. So, you know, both places are good places to follow along for information.
Yeah. And that's why I wanted you on, just because I want, it doesn't have to be high level guys, but just guys that are going through a logical thought process, explaining what they're doing. And you're an awesome one. That's one, you're at a high level, but you're also, I watch your YouTube videos. I follow in the prep series because it's insightful too. And you explain the why behind what you do. And that's always the bodybuilders I connected with. Because if I understood the why, it kind of gives me some application to apply it to myself in the gym. So I think your prep series has been really well. So I'll put that in the show notes for everyone to check out and follow along. And I'm excited, man, to see you in Chicago. You know, the judge, it is what it is, but I think you're bringing something really special. And And I just wish you the best out there, man. We'll kill it, and then we'll definitely be killing food afterwards.
Yeah, for sure, man. Whatever I can do to help you out while we're out there. We'll have a Airbnb, and we'll just be hanging out from Tuesday on. So you're more than welcome to come hang out whenever if you want. And then let's definitely smash some food after.
Yeah, sounds good, man. We're actually staying at the host hotel.
Okay, cool.
We debated it a lot, but we like that convenience. But we're gonna have to figure out. Maybe we'll bring a microwave in there or something. I don't know. So
yeah, go buy a microwave from Walmart.
Usually Tim sets up like a conference room of microwaves. We'll see.
Yeah, he usually got like a little bank of them, but I feel like for you, especially how you like your food, like the $30 from Walmart might be worth it.
Yeah.
Have to smuggle it in a suitcase, but.
Well, anyway, man, thank you so much for joining us, and appreciate your time a lot. I know how busy you are. I know what prep time means as well. So again, thank you.
Of course, John. I appreciate you having me on. Thanks for having me on, Luke, as well. It was fun talking with you.
Yeah. For more information, head to j3university.com for anyone that's interested in actually learning the whys behind just stuff like we talked about today. This is J3U Podcast, and we will speak to you next time.